All right, so let's break down the main points of today's budget. Devin Murrigan in studio with me for this hour. And Devin, as expected, Eskom front and centre, as it should be. The Minister making the point that Eskom is the single biggest constraint on our economy. Eskom simply cannot fail. The big issue, of course, and we knew this was coming, but now we have more details. Eskoms, two-thirds of Eskom's over 400 billion rand debt is going to be taken on by government. What does that mean and how's it going to work?
So, as you said, Sally, we were expecting it. The Finance Minister mentioned that the government will take on two-thirds of Eskom's debt in the medium-term budget. It's a big responsibility. Let's very quickly look at the numbers to see exactly how they panned out in the medium-term budget. 254 billion rand, that's the overall amount that the two-thirds come up to. What the government is doing is that it says it will pay 184 billion rand directly to Eskom over the next 3 years. Then, in 2025, government will then take over 70 billion rand of that debt. Now, you asked, why have we got here and why that's the case? Well, simply because the narrative is that if government absorbs that responsibility on the debt, Eskom can do what it's supposed to do and take care of its operations, i.e. provide electricity to the country. How far that will go to ease and better its operations is another story.
Does it mean that Eskom will not have to incur further debt?
Yeah, well, that's virtually impossible. I mean, I think that the debt will start to accumulate on Eskom's side. But what the hope is that Eskom will start generating revenue that is meaningful and material to use. So that's going to be a wait-and-see approach to see how that happens. And by the way, let me mention there are some conditions attached to that.
Interesting.
And I think what's important there is that the Treasury is saying that Eskom must implement recommendations by an independent panel that National Treasury puts forward. I got to tell you, Sally, we've had conditions for Eskom in the past, not such a great track record.
Yeah, it's very interesting indeed. So that's the big picture in terms of Eskom's debt, which is a massive, massive problem. When it comes down to individuals and businesses, there is relief. As promised, the President said details would be made available in the budget speech. Enoch Godongwana coming through today. Take us through that.
I think the single most anticipated remark ahead of this budget was what exactly would happen, an incentive that may be put forward by the Finance Ministry if you put on solar panels on your roof. Now, let's take a look at that because that was not missed in this budget. The Minister telling us this afternoon that if you're a household and you're putting up solar panels, supplying alternate energy to your household, you would get 25% of a rebate on the cost of those panels. Now, whether or not there's some sort of retro legality for people that had already put on those solar panels, we yet to hear when we decode. But that comes into effect on the 1st of March 2023, which is next month.
That is capped, though. 15,000 rand is the most you can claim back. So if you essentially spend more than 60,000 rand on installing solar, battery inverter, you're not going to get any rebate after that amount. Yes. But still, that is great news. And for businesses?
Yeah. Businesses, it works out to 125%. I'm going to put that to Christo van der Reede, head of the Agri-SA, when we chat to him. What does that mean, 125% rebate on those businesses that do this? But just one caveat here as well. Remember that if you were putting on some solar panels and you're wishing and hoping for that rebate, you've got 1 year to do so because that was a time frame.
Yeah. And then finally, let's bring it down to you and me. Income tax, no changes. Sin taxes up. And some increase in the social grant relief.
Yeah. And I think, Sally, before we get to that sin tax point, I just want to bring up something very quickly on the debt metrics. I mean, government has debt in itself. It's not just Eskom. So let's just very quickly find out, because it's a staggering figure. 360 billion rand per year we're paying for debt. What does that work out to? 18% of all government revenue is going towards debt, and that's climbing by 9% a year. It's the fastest climbing item in the budget process. So it's a flag. It's a flag that, yes, we get this relief, but there's your nightmare over there. We've got to contain that.
And am I correct that because government is now taking on two-thirds of Eskom's debt, our debt is not going to level out as soon as we'd hoped?
Yeah, you're spot on. That's the debt to GDP ratio. hovering from 70 to 75%. And what the government or the finance minister is saying this afternoon is that because of that, you might get the stability taking 3 years more to get on track. So we're not going to be stable 3 years more because of these social obligations from the budget.
On the debt, you were explaining to me a little earlier the sort of 60% ratio to GDP. So compared to what your country earns, 60% in debt is not too bad. But as soon as you get over 70, we're in tricky territory.
Especially if your growth rate is not high enough to generate more income and jobs. So, 70% debt to GDP for the United States with a great growth rate is fine, not for South Africa.
Yeah. So at the moment, 18 cents out of every rand goes directly to paying that debt.
To servicing
In
debt,
fact, to servicing the interest on that debt. Okay, and then finally, let's get to the sin tax. You can tell why I wanted to ignore the massive debt.
Very quickly. All right, let's get to that. So these are the taxes that we were told that the taxes were not going to go up, and it didn't. But, not everyone escapes from that relief. Sin taxes, the so-called sin taxes, are going up. The biggest casualty here is if you're buying cigarettes quite often. A pack of 20 goes up by 98 cents according to the revised duty. Beer 10 cents up, wines and spirits, or wine rather, 18 cents. And just under 4 rand for a bottle of spirits. I don't know how many people smoke cigars in South Africa, but 5 rand 47 higher for cigars, Sally.
You know what? I have no sympathy, probably because I'm not a smoker. And it's bad for you. It's also good, just in a final note, I know we're going to bring in Rupiwe in just a moment, who's down in Cape Town, what the finance minister said about the incredible success of SARS to claw back taxes, to get better tax revenue, but also to clamp down on the illegal cigarette market, which of course delivers no tax for us at all.
And there's a number to illustrate it. We thought we'd have 83 billion rand more in our tax revenue in October. We ended up with 93 billion rand more. So that just shows you that the tax collection mechanisms are working to some extent.